Towards the President and to direct the remarks to the Chair. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2025, the gentleman from California, Mr. LaMaffa, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the time and the opportunity to shed the light on several subjects that we could cover here tonight. And indeed, much going on and much to be excited about as well. In my home state of California, we have several issues I'd like to touch upon. It'll have to do with water supply, fire and forestry, and some rebuilding that'll need to be done around our state. But my colleague also here tonight has joined me, and I would like to yield him as much time as he'd like to consume. My good friend Glenn Grothman from Wisconsin he's been a strong leader on immigration and more specifically controlling our border and also sticking up for our families in this country of the values it's going to take to have strong families and maintain the values that really were founding values and the one that are going to make our country strong. So I appreciate his work and his articulation on that. So I yield to my colleague.
Thank you. There has been so much in the news in the last 2 weeks, it's hard to know where to start. I'd like to cover a couple issues that the mainstream media has picked up on, though perhaps not done the best job on covering, and one issue that made a huge difference in the lives of the most vulnerable of us, that Donald Trump weighed in, not by doing something, but by allowing an administrative rule to die. The first great victory for Donald Trump, which hasn't been reported out there, concerns the effort by the Biden administration, which ran out of time, to get rid of what they call 14C certificates. Everybody may be familiar with light manufacturing or packaging done in their district by people who are handicapped. Maybe they have spina bifida, maybe they have Down syndrome, but in any event, for this reason, they are not able to be profitably employed for above minimum wage or minimum wage dollars. And each state does it a little bit differently, but the states make an estimate of what that employee is worth, and maybe they're paid $5 an hour for, like I said, light manufacturing or packaging. If you tour these facilities, and I think every congressman ought to tour them at least once, it is one of the most enjoyable things you can do because you will find the people who have been dealt a difficult lot on life, so happy to see you, so happy to see what they're doing with you, so happy to make friends with the other employees there, both other employees who have different abilities and other employees who are usually in a supervisory capacity. These are also a godsend to the parents or guardians of these folks, and that under normal circumstances they have to worry when the guardians or parents die off, what type of friends, what type of social life they will have. But because they frequently stay in these facilities or work in these facilities for 20 or 30 or 40 years, they develop lifelong friendships, which are so important for these folks to have. Now, had Donald Trump not won the election, they would have continued to work through the administrative rule process, and it's entirely possible that these sort of facilities would have been shut down by a Biden or a Harris administration. They were working towards that. You might say, why would anybody take away the right for these jobs for these people? The reason is they'll say, well, if we're paying somebody $5 an hour, we're taking advantage of them. We can't take advantage of them, so we'd rather have them shut down. How horrible. To the most vulnerable members of our society, Joe Biden was prepared to say, if you want to work here for $5 an hour, tough. We're going to close that facility, or we'll leave the facility open, but you'll no longer be able to work. You'll no longer have the pride of being able to get a paycheck and spending it on clothes for yourself or gifts for your parents, what have you. I would like to thank President Trump for not continuing with that administrative rule. And at least we know, probably for the next 4 years, the jobs of these folks, which means so much to them, more to them than I would say the average citizen in our society. I'd like to say thank you, President Trump, for allowing the most vulnerable members of our society to have the choice to continue to work for, in some cases, sub-minimum wage, but have the enjoyment of that independence. And I should point out that almost all of the people I'm talking about have some SSI payment in addition to that, so it's not like they're expected to pay a mortgage with their $5 an hour job. They get other governmental assistance as well. So I know there are a lot of other things we've been grateful for President Trump for the last couple of weeks for, but for keeping the 14C certificates, that is a tremendous victory for the most vulnerable of us, and I don't think it would have happened if President Trump didn't get elected. Now, the next thing to look at, we've heard people talk about Elon Musk and what he did at what he wants to do to USAID. First of all, I'd like to point out that the reason people are mad at Elon Musk, who can't do anything on his own, who all he can do is advise the president, but the reason they're mad at him is, horror of horrors, he thought there was a government program that wasn't necessary. That's not the way things work here. Nobody believes that if Elon Musk had Donald Trump's ear and came out for more preschool, if he came out for more mental health funding, if he came out for if he came out for expanded government daycare, the folks on the other side of this aisle would be praising Elon Musk for being a forward-looking person and for doing what people on that side of the aisle want to do, which is either expand old programs or come up with new government programs. And quite frankly, as long as I've been here, I'm sure there must be some government program that ended, but I can't think of any. Okay, so Elon Musk is under attack for actually suggesting a government program is unnecessary. I praise him for that. There is nothing wrong with him advising President Trump. I don't know whether you folks would feel better if they gave him a position and a $100,000 a year salary. I don't know. But it is refreshing that some of the most successful people in America can use their mind, their brains, to advise President Trump on how to be a good president. And it's particularly good to have somebody outside this building who is not used to the swamp-type mentality of we never under any circumstances get rid of a program. The only question is whether we're going to expand it 2% or 8%. It's great to have a friend who can look at some programs and say, hey, maybe this program sounded good when we first created it in 1963 or whatever, but it hasn't worked up to snuff. And of course, I agree with Elon Musk that some of the money spent on these programs is even a moral stain on the United States of America, particularly a moral stain because we are spending money in other countries. When we talk about gender-affirming care, that's where they give puberty blockers to young children. I think it's horrific that we would give puberty blockers to a 12 or 13-year-old in America. But America is supposed to be the light unto the world. Can you imagine the United States weighing in and giving gender-affirming care to the poor little children in Guatemala? I mean, how bad can we be? How embarrassing can we be? That's what we do with the incredible amount of wealth that this country has been given. We take our wealth and try to screw up, what I would say screw up, the poor little children in Guatemala. I'm glad Elon Musk came across this program. And I'm glad, upon people pointing out what's in the program, that Donald Trump, when he heard about it, full bore, put his foot on the brake and said, if the people running this program are spending the money that way, we got to stop spending money right away and look a little bit further into the program. But in any event, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask people on that side of the aisle is take an honest look at yourself. If Elon Musk announced that we needed more preschool, if Elon Musk announced we were going to need more mental health, with where the mental health professions are today in favor of these puberty blockers and that sort of thing, would you really be concerned that he's advising President Trump? Or would you be praising him? And would the Washington Post and New York Times be praising Elon Musk for being open-minded and ignoring the hidebound conservative members of the Republican Party? Of course they'd be praising him. The only reason they question whether or not he can advise President Trump is because they don't like, for almost the first time that I've been here, that we genuinely are seeing a government program begin to end, hopefully. The third thing I'll point out, President Trump signed a bill today dealing with men and women's sports. It was a good bill. There are not a whole lot of men participating in women's sports around the country, but it's certainly a little weird that when one sets up a swimming tournament or a track meet or something, where it's very clear we have the men's event and the women's event, that under any circumstances we take a man and say, well, just because you feel like a woman today, we're going to pretend you're a woman. I think that's unusual enough. But I'm going to ask, and President Trump has had executive orders on this topic as well, I'm going to hope that we're able to do something statutorily about getting rid of government funding for programs that do things like give surgeries on minors, give puberty blockers on minors, things that there's no shortage of intelligent people who will say this is damaging. Not to mention there are a huge number of people with just plain common sense who realize that you don't try to engage in irrevocable medical procedures with 14 or 15-year-olds. As a matter of fact, I would even say it's medically inexcusable to engage in these procedures in people who are 24 or 25 years old. After all, in this country, can't buy a beer until you're 21 years old. Can't buy a cigarette until you're 21 years old. And I would think any medical professional with any morality, I mean, I realize they're making money on this thing, but with any morality would harm these young people. So it's my hope that my leadership team, now that we took care of the ridiculous idea that men should be able to pick whether they're men or women, depending upon, I guess, whether there's a track meet that day. I hope our leadership team begins to go after these so-called medical professionals who are doing irrevocable damage either with drugs or with surgeries on people under 18. And quite frankly, it ought to be barred for people under age 21. And quite frankly, the medical society ought to, on their own, make it clear that it's medical malpractice to do this sort of thing, even on a 25 or 26-year-old, because we all know very well that the way we feel about things when we're 20 or 24 or 25 is frequently very difficult or very different the way we feel about things when we're 30 years old. So I'd like to thank the gentleman from California for allowing me to address these issues. And remember, folks out there, if you've got a ward or a child who worked for what used to be called a sheltered workshop, President Trump kept your ward or child employed the way they want to. But in any event,